You are live.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Good evening, everyone. My name is Wei Mason. I'm the chair of the Halifax and West Community Council. Today is August 13th, 2024 at 6 p.m. I'm going to call this meeting to order. I will confirm with the clerk that we have a quorum, which is 4 members. We have 5 present, I believe.
Yes.
I will note for the record that we're having technical issues with Councillor Morse, who is attending, but her camera is not working and she will have to tell us by voice if she wants to speak. This meeting is called to order. First, I'd like to offer an acknowledgement that Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes we are all treaty people. First on the agenda, or before we call to order, you know what's missing from this is, oh no, sorry, approval of minutes first. Approval of the minutes, July 16th, 2024. Would someone care to move the minutes? Councillor Cleary, seconded by Councillor Smith. Any further discussion of the minutes of July 16th, 2024? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
That carries. Thank you. So we'll move to approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. I will ask the clerk, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
There are no additions or deletions to the agenda from the clerk's office.
Very good. Members of council, are there any additions or deletions or modifications to the order of business? Going once, going twice. All right, I'll look for a mover and a seconder for the agenda as presented. Moved by Councillor Cleary, seconded by Councillor Iona Stoddard. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Thank you very much. So next is business arising from the minutes. There is none. Call for declaration of conflict of interest. Seeing none, we'll move on. There are no notices of reconsideration, no notices or motions of rescission, no consideration of deferred business, no notices of tabled matters, which brings us to 10 hearings, public hearing 10.1.1, which is for planning application 2024-00240, substantive amendment to development agreement for 6324 and 6330 Quinpool Road. We'll start with a presentation from staff, and I see Dean McDougall is here to lead us through this. Thank you, Dean.
Good evening. Thank you. I'll share my screen. Could someone just confirm that that screen is up?
Yep.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Dean McDougall. I'm a Planner 3 with Development Services, and I'll be providing the staff presentation for the public hearing of Plan Application 2024-00240. The applicant for this proposal is Dexel Developments, and the location is 6324 and 6330 Quinpool Road in Halifax. And the proposal is to construct a 2-story addition to an existing or soon to be existing 8-story building. That 8-story building is under construction today. This is requested through an amendment to an existing development agreement. The site is located on Quinpool Road, and it's mid-block between Oxford and Preston Streets. And the property is L-shaped, so it also fronts onto Pepperell Street, as shown on the images on the screen. This is the site today. It's currently a vacant site, but construction has commenced for the 8-story building, as I mentioned. And most will most likely remember this site as the former McDonald's on Quinpool. When a planning application is made, it's often enabled by planning policies, meaning it was envisioned that development would happen in certain locations in our municipality, and rules and guidelines were written to help shape what that development would look like. So planning and HRM consists of 3 levels of documents. It starts with the regional plan, which is very high level, 30,000 feet in the air, and it identifies where population growth should occur and where investment of services like transit, pipe water, and sewer should also occur. And then the second level of planning policies is the community plan. So we zoom in a little bit closer, and this is where we focus on a very specific geographic area and get a little bit more detailed on what type of development and uses should happen where. So often planning applications, which require approval by council like this one, they're enabled in this plan, enabled meaning that they're allowed to be considered. So for this application, the applicable community plan is the regional center secondary planning strategy, or the center plan. And then the third layer and most detailed planning document we have, it's the land use bylaw. This outlines specific zoning and regulations that don't require special approval from council. If you meet the regulations and the uses, then you can go get a permit from a development officer. No public consultation required. This slide outlines the different stages of a planning application. As you can see highlighted in the blue box, we're at the public hearing, which is the final stage before the appeal period. So the decision by council tonight is appealable, and there's a 14-day appeal period. The property, just a little bit overview of the different regulations applied to it. It's serviced by municipal sewer and water. The zone is the Center 2 zone that faces the portion of the site that faces Quinpool, and then the Center 1 zone is on the portion of the site that faces Pepperell Street. It's designated center, and as I mentioned, the existing use, there's an approved development agreement, an approved development agreement and an issued building permit for an 8-story mixed-use multiple unit dwelling. And the enabling policy is IM 33.5, which I'll speak to in just a second. First, I'd like to quickly talk about the history of this project. So this project predates the center plan. The policy that enabled the development agreement application, it was approved in 2019, in the summer of 2019. And then in that fall, the center plan was approved in segments. So from 2019 to 2021, there was different, there's package A and then package B and then the full center plan. And so as we know, when center plan was approved, there was a transition policy that allows planning applications that were already under consideration the ability to continue. So this project fell under that category. And in 2021, Halifax and West Community Council approved a development agreement to enable the 8-story mixed-use building at the site. And then construction commenced on March 20th of this year, following the issuance of a building permit. Now, this current planning application, so the 2-story addition, it stems directly from a site-specific policy that was inserted into the center plan as part of the Housing Accelerator Fund amendment package that was approved this past spring. And so enabling policy IM 33.5 enables council to consider a site-specific amendment to this development agreement at this site to allow the 2-story addition. And then the policy, it was approved as part of the amendments as this site was identified as a strategic location to achieve additional housing, and it's close to transit in an area that's already designated for growth. So the proposal, 2 stories added to the 8-story building, which is under construction. This addition of the 2 stories will yield an additional 38 units, resulting in a total of 193 units. And then there are no other changes to the building aspects as proposed. So here are 2 elevations, and these are not to scale, but the gray one, the black and white one on the left, shows the approved development currently under construction, and then the colored one on the right shows what it would look like with the 2-story addition. So they're just adding 2 stories to the tower portion of the site, and I'm sure the applicant will go into more details about their proposal during their presentation. In terms of public engagement, 221 notifications were mailed to the neighboring properties. 7 individuals contacted me directly with concerns about the application, and our stats show that 77 individuals went to the webpage. The concerns provided were around traffic, the benefit to HRM, and also the loss of sky view and shadow impacts. So staff's recommendation, staff recommend that Halifax and West Community Council approve the proposed development agreement, amending development agreement, as attached to the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDougall. So I will now ask for questions of clarification to staff or members of Community Council. I'm seeing no hands. I'm not hearing anything from Catherine Morse, who's now muted. Are you able to unmute yourself, Catherine, just to make sure that's okay? All right, you're gonna have to text me if you want to talk, and then we'll figure that out at that point. Moving right along. So there's no questions. So thank you, Dean. You're free to go sit in the audience, and we will now open the public hearing. I'll invite the applicant to address Community Council, who's allowed 10 minutes. The clerk will note when there's 30 seconds remaining and when the time is ended. So we have Nick Lopresti from Dexel Developments and Louis Lowen of Dexel available for questions. So Nick, go ahead. Guess we have to promote you so you can talk first. There we go.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. We just have a small presentation. I'll just start out and then Nick will continue. Okay. Thank you. This is the presentation for tonight, August the 13th, for the Compa Road project. Next slide, please. Just a brief history. The Lowen Group, the property is being developed by Lowen Group, developed by Dexel, and will be managed by Paramount. We are a local developer. We've been doing this for over 30 years with a very extensive focus on urban development, such as this one. Some other projects we've done, and the images here are the Vic and the Greenvale and Dartmouth and St. Joseph Square in the north end of Halifax. Yes, I already mentioned that Dexel will be doing the development, design development, and Paramount will be managing this building, this property. Next slide, please. So a quick building overview. It's a mixed use, parking, commercial, and apartments. The addition, this proposal is for the addition of 2 floors. It goes from 8 then to 10, and there's a penthouse floor. A total of 193 units, or an increase. The additional 2 floors are 38 units. It is a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. There's 7,600 square feet of ground floor commercial on Compa Road. There's a landscape podium, underground parking underneath it. The underground parking will be available to the public on a monthly basis. And of course, we will be within all the bylaws with respect to bike storage, indoor bike storage. There is amenity space throughout the building, both interior and exterior. And a signature design that we do is we have 4 townhouses with their own entrances on Pepperell Street. And on the next slide, I'll let Nick continue. I think that hopefully you're able to switch Nick over as a panelist.
Nick, you're muted, but you are here as a panelist now. Bottom of the window. There you go. You're here.
There I
Perfect.
am. Okay, so I'll speak a little bit about the building features, following up on Louis' overview. You have a 2-meter setback from the current sidewalks on the Compa Road side, and that gives you a better pedestrian experience, a bit more space on the sidewalk and more space to enjoy the shop fronts that are along that frontage. we've created a fine-grained street retail experience, adding to the small scale retail streetscape that we're all familiar with in Quinpool Road. We've articulated the architecture, and we'll see some more images to add to that. The parking for the underground parking for this building is located off of Pepple Street, so there won't be any particular traffic added to the Quinpool Road side. We have 164 underground parking stalls on 2 levels. Service and loading is accessed from Pepple Street. That's for moving the tenants and people living in the building. And we have also well lit exterior for pedestrian safety along Quinpool Road and along the Pepple Street side where the main entry for the residents are. We have 2 residential entries. We have a convenience entry, and we'll see it on the next slides off of Quinpool Road, but the main residential entry and lobby are accessed from the residential side of this property, which is on Pepple Street. We've recognized the residential scale of the existing streetscape with 2- and 3-story street walls that face Quinpool Road. As Louis mentioned, on Pepple Street, we have, as we often try to integrate 4 townhouse units that have direct access to the street and have a street scale that's appropriate for the residential neighborhood. And we have over 2,000 square feet of ground floor interior amenity space. We have over 700 square feet of ground floor exterior amenity terrace space with a lobby which is about 500 square meters and an interior gym which we'll see is on the 4th floor of about almost 1,000 square feet, as well as a 4th floor amenity terrace facing Pepple of over 2,000 square feet. Next slide, please. Could you please go back a slide? There we go. So this is a view from the Quinpool Road side. So we're looking south. We're facing southwards here. And here you see how the base of the building is articulated into smaller portions that are 3 stories. And you see 3 different ones, each one with different proportions and different window articulations. The material here is a brick masonry unit. And we have the shop fronts, as you see below, that are arranged in some deep recesses in the facade to create some expanded sort of sidewalk areas for possible outdoor seating. You'll see on the left here, there's the green Soku. Soku is the brand for the building. South of Quinpool is what it stands for. That entry that you see at the street level on the left, far left, which would be the east edge of this facade here, is the convenience entry I mentioned earlier for the residents, so they can access the shopping pedestrian street on Quinpool Road directly from there, or enter from there, or meet their friends there. The upper portion of the building is a vertical tile look. It's a porcelain rear ventilated rain screen. We're thinking of using a tile that has a vertical orientation. It's a durable material, and it'll give it a very clean look, sharp look. We have balconies and corner bay units that are articulating this facade, as well as windows which are paired in 2 stories with arranged in vertical ribbons. So we have a vertical accent again with the fenestration, vertical bays stacked at the corners for views, and the color, one of the theme colors, which is the green here, is going to be the tint or the fit pattern that will be printed on the glass balconies. We have some planters at street level as well. They're going to be in corten steel, give it a little bit of texture, warmth, and you can see that above the street wall, that's 3 stories, we have 10 terraces for the tenants above the glass rail. So they have a great view up and down of Wimple Road. Next slide, please. These are drawings that were submitted with the application for the additional 2 stories. This is the elevation from the north elevation, the one facing Quimple Road, which we saw the view from. And again, it just really calls off the various materials and features. You can see that there's a penthouse story above that we mentioned, and we have some terraces for the penthouse as well. And to the right, you have also a screened mechanical area for the air conditioning equipment. So that's all hidden behind a pre-finished aluminum screen. And again, the corners have vertical bay windows, and the other windows are articulated in ribbon windows vertically with the balconies and the color features which you saw in the previous view. Next slide, please. This is the east elevation. This faces the new building to the east of us that was just completed recently, and is abutting the well-known Kentucky Fried Chicken establishment. So we have kind of an east courtyard here at the base of our building. And otherwise, again, the material scheme is the masonry for the bottom 3 stories, and then this vertical look tile
8
and
seconds.
ribbon windows. Okay, next slide, please. And this is the elevation to the south facing Pepperell. You see the townhouse articulations that are similar to our St. Joseph's project in the Haddiston region. Next slide, please. This is the west elevation. Again, the same material schemes at the 3-story base, and then the tower materials above. And that's all I'll say for now. Thank you.
Got about 10 seconds, Lou. You want to add anything?
I think we're fine. We'll be
Okay.
just take questions, I guess. Obviously, there might be more questions about the architecture or about the extra stories. Be more happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Lopresti and Mr. Lowen. With that, we'll now ask for questions of clarification from members of Community Council. Question from Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 super quick questions. Do you, for the applicant, is there access from Quimpool to Pepperell, or do the townhouses, because they have their own entrance, don't have access to the other units, so folks can get from Quimpool to Pepperell if they're residents in the building?
The townhouses have their own entrance within the building, and all the residents have access both to Pepperell and to Quimpool. But the public would only have access to Pepperell. So if you came to visit, you would come to Pepperell Street, but you could actually exit the building from Quimpool Road for convenience.
Right. So if you're a visitor, depending on what side you enter is what side you exit. So if I enter on Quimpool, I exit on Quimpool. If I enter on Pepperell, I exit on Pepperell. If I'm a visitor.
If you're a visitor, you can only visit from Pepperell Street.
I see. So I can't even access on Quimpool.
That's
Gotcha.
right, because the intercom for security purposes is on the main entrance is actually from Pepperell Street.
Oh, okay, that's where I was confused. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
And since you mentioned it, I wasn't going to ask, but if you want to just talk about the 2-story addition, while you give you a couple seconds to mention that.
This is back in the fall. We knew that when this project was going on, or at least planning wise, it started actually about 6 years ago now. By the time we were getting ready to start the project, obviously the housing situation in Halifax is been in a crisis since COVID, more or less. And in discussion with staff, understanding the accelerator fund, the idea of adding 2 more floors would immediately feed into the ecosystem of housing 38 units. That would be no extra process for the city. And through that process and discussion with staff, we applied, and that was, one of the conditions. We had already finished the design. We had to basically redesign the building to a certain extent, which was challenging, but I was not willing to take on the additional floors if there was going to be any delays to the project. Now, of course, none of this is dictated to us. We just, as a company, we really had to start that project. It was kind of ready to start, and we did not want to go through a process of redesigning, and then because that process would have taken at least 1 to 2 years if we had to go back to scratch to redesign a new building. And so with staff's consent, I'll say, and a positive report, we worked with them, and that's why we added those extra 2 stories.
Thank you.
There's no other changes to the building.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Thank
would
you.
just add, for information's sake, because it was part of the redesign, adding the 2 stories, is that we added an elevator. So now we have 3 instead of 2 for the convenience of the increased population of the building and having more convenient elevator wait times for the tenants. So that's not a small addition, but it was necessary to make the building perform as we like it to perform for the people who live there.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Smith. I heard a noise from Councillor Morse, who's not available on video, so I'm just going to check and see if she has a question.
I just wondered about the ownership. Is this going to be 100% rental, or will there be some condos, or how will the ownership be divided?
It is a apartment building. All the units and the commercial will be available to rent or to lease. There will be no condominiums within this building.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other questions from council, so thank you both. You'll have an opportunity to come back if you wish after the registered speakers. So that puts us to the public component. We have 1 registered speaker today. So I would ask the speaker and speakers at any public hearing to keep your comments respectful, on topic, directed to me as chair. No cheering or booing. Can't imagine you doing that at this point since we're on Zoom and you're the 1 person here. So Ian Zwiers, I'm going to guess. I'm probably got that wrong.
Zwiers, that's fine.
Zwiers, very good, is here. You'll have 5 minutes to speak. The clerk will advise you when you have 30 seconds left. And thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you. First, just acknowledge my conflicts. I live nearby. I'll see this building from my bedroom every morning. I have an interest in seeing more rentals built. I have friends, family, and children who need or have or will need affordable rentals. So I have 2 general areas of concern. The first is that the proposal is not consistent with the zoning that came into effect only in June. So in their February letter, the proponents indicated that their proposal, that they anticipated it would be within the changes to the center plan. And that is not the case. So 2/3 of the site is Center 2, and the remaining third is Center 1. And if you average the floor area ratio by that, you will get a floor area ratio of 5. So 2/3 of 6 and 1/3 of 3 gives 5. Now that is almost exactly the floor area ratio of the original development agreement, which was 4.97. And the proposal here is to increase that ratio to 5.97. So Mr. McDougall referred to site-specific language in the Housing Accelerator Fund. That language is in an approved appendix, and it refers to height, but it does not refer to floor area ratio. So I think we're talking about perhaps different things. So at the very least, I think the council should be aware that this proposal is in excess of the upzoning that occurred only 2 months ago. So the second, zoning is here to give all parties certainty in what they need. We talked about that Mr. McDougall brought that up, that zoning allows for things to go ahead quickly without council's involvement. And a lot of effort has gone into the center plan. and to make that possible for more people. And I think council should rely on that where possible. So my second area of concern is kind of feeding off of that, is that the impact of this on potentially other future development agreements. First is that if development agreements in general, not specifically this one, if they're subject to revision, substantial revision, 20%, 3 years after the fact, you're going to find more opposition from residents to every agreement, because they won't be able to trust that the agreement that's reached is the one that will be built. So council needs to consider that trust from residents is vital for future development agreements to be successful. So the other part on the impact on the development process is, again, meetings like this, on a Tuesday in August is not the great use of council's time or staff. As much as we can stick to zoning on things that are, I realize this is different. This is a grandfathered agreement, so it's not zoning, but that the original development agreement could be achieved with the existing zoning is a very positive development. So those are really my two concerns. I live in a city because I like living in the city. Density is good. We need more of it. I appreciate the attention to detail and the design. That's great. But clear rules consistently followed is the key to get things moving quickly. And I encourage you to stick with the existing development agreement because it is consistent with the zoning. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions of clarification for the member of the public? Everyone's doing twice. All right, thank you very much. We're going to put you back into attendees, I think, or I don't know what happens at this point. So to the public who's wondering why we're having these technical issues, there was a big update to Zoom in the last couple of days, and now everything's acting differently. So that's the end of, so we don't have any other registered speakers. You had to register by, I think, 4:30 yesterday, as I recall, right, Madam Clerk? So I don't believe that's it. Correct. Okay, so there's no opportunity for people to join at this point. So we will provide the applicant for an opportunity to briefly respond to the points raised by the speaker, if they wish. You have 5 minutes. That's you, Dexel and Paramount. If you want, you're muted there, Louis.
Louis, would you like to say something?
I guess respectfully, the questions are valid. Maybe some clarity for the other members of council. I know, yourself, Council Mason, you've been around for a while. You've seen this project in many lights. This specific, the center plan actually allows for, I think, and I haven't checked lately, but at the time it was a 30-story building, and it might even be 40 stories now. So the project could have easily been redesigned to accommodate a lot more. But the project that's been set for that's being built and that was proposed under this amendment had already went through a design process. And it's not a couple weeks. It is literally probably tens of thousands of hours of time and probably a good solid year of work to be able to build a building. And that's one thing I think that is not maybe fully understood even within council or the public. These projects don't just get built just because somebody wants to build them. It takes a lot of momentum. This process didn't start with this DA. It started back in, I think, 2016, if I recall. So there's lots of public input in this process. So I guess I can clarify any other questions, but I'm not sure if the speaker really had any other questions. But I'd be more than happy to.
Well, no, that's it. Thank you. I don't, at this point, there's no opportunity for council to ask you any further questions. So you are relieved from duty, both of you. Thank you very much, Mr. Loudon and Mr. Lopresti. So I will
Thank
ask
you,
for a motion to
everyone.
close the public hearing. Moved by Councillor Cleary, seconded by Councillor Stoddard. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Public hearing is now closed. So at this point, we members of council can ask staff for clarification. Reminder, this is not debate. This is simply clarification of what we've heard from the public, from the proponent, or from staff. Are there any questions of clarification? Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, just to the point the speaker brought up, and I'll just get Mr. McDougall, our planner, on this to talk about it. I think the last question the speaker had was on, wasting our Tuesday. Just to let him know that this is a regular scheduled Tuesday meeting once a month. So it's nothing extra here tonight. We'd be here with this application or not. But to the question of zoning versus site-specific amendments like development agreements and that sort of thing, and the history of this one, because this was actually something there was a number of developments we did actually before the center plan was adopted, and looking at what we could do in these areas. But just speak to the zoning as of right situation versus development agreement, and the fact that we have a public hearing. So although I believe this is largely consistent with the center plan, because of the development agreement, we actually have to go to the public and seek additional feedback. So if Mr. McDougall could just speak to our process and the history, just to assure the public that, we're not doing anything untoward here. This is actually, in fact, the planning process we're following here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, so this, as I stated, this application predates the center plan. So prior to the center plan, development agreements were in front of specifically this council much more frequently. That was a large way of how we did development and planning in HRM. And then one of the main catalysts for the center plan was to eliminate that site-specific development agreement requirement. So it allowed for development to happen more as of right through code-based zoning regulations that the that the public member was aware of. So this one is sort of tied to the past. This sort of way of coming to council for changes to a development agreement, it's not through that. That's not how development would happen within the center plan area. So Halifax Peninsula and Dartmouth within the Cirque. And so because this is tied to the past, we're sort of living in the past. This application was actually evaluated against the policies that existed the Halifax Peninsula municipal planning strategy. And this is a very much, if not a one-off, a two-off. There is criteria within the center plan that allows for amendments to existing development agreements. So existing meaning development agreements that were approved prior to the center plan. And they're very minimal in terms of what can be changed. Things like architectural materials can be changed, but definitely not density, definitely not more units, definitely not changing in height or scale of a development. So through the Housing Accelerator Fund, these changes, so density and height, that's how that was enabled for this property. And there's only, I think there was maybe another property within the peninsula that could also do those changes. So I'd like to just reassure that this is not something that would be coming to council very often. Changes to existing development agreements that increase density. They're required to follow what they have prior to center plan being put in process. And back to the process part, so the application, the planning application always requires a substantive one, meaning it requires changes above what the original agreement envisioned. They always require public input as one step, and they always require council's decision. So this is following the process accordingly.
Thank you. I think that was just important to make sure people understand, because as you say, we're kind of living in the past in the sense that since 2019, when we passed package A, and 2021 with package B, as you say, Halifax and West Community Council, we really haven't met very often on these type of development agreements since because most things come now as of right. And if anything is largely inconsistent with the center plan, staff actually has no obligation to take an application today, as they would have had under the 1978 rules that we used to work under. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. McDougall.
Thank you very much, Mr. McDougall. Mr. Councillor Cleary will move to Councillor Smith.
Thank you. And Sean's question prompted an answer to my question, which was if you could talk a little bit about the floor area piece, but I think you kind of covered how that piece works into the changes now, so I won't ask you to rehash that. The only other question I had is related to servicing the building. Was there any concerns through the review period of, for what it seems like, because the parking entrance is on Pepperell, servicing the commercial and residential, so garbage, all the things that happen with servicing of commercial residential building. Was there any concerns brought up related to that happening on Pepperell Street at all?
Thank you, Councillor. No, there was no concern. So that we did require a revised traffic impact statement too, for the additional units, and that was approved by Traffic Services and Development Engineering. And nothing was raised by Waste Management regarding the servicing of the property. So no, there was no concerns at all from staff regarding that.
Thanks.
Any further questions of clarification?
Yes, I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Councillor Morse.
Thank you. What is the maximum height permitted on Quimple Road under the center plan? And is there a difference between that and what's permitted using Housing Accelerator Fund?
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. So the maximum, the Quinpool Road, or portions of it from Oxford Street to Roby, are regulated by floor area ratio. And so the floor area ratios differ along where you are on Quinpool, but this site specifically, 6 is the floor area ratio facing Quinpool, and then 3 is the floor area ratio facing Pepperell, and then up to 90 meters is the height limit.
Up to 90 meters. Okay.
Yeah.
And so this change under Housing Accelerator Fund doesn't exceed that then?
Staff did not do a detailed comparison to what could be built under the center plan versus this proposal. So I can't answer confidently that it doesn't exceed it. I mean, it definitely doesn't exceed it in height. And the floor area ratios, as mentioned, for the site are just shy of 6, which match the Quinpool side. If anything, I would probably say that the building could be taller because of the floor plate maximum requirements within the center plan. They have a 900 square meter floor plate maximum, where this development has larger floor plates. So to reach that far, they would have to build up taller potentially. That would be probably the most detailed analysis I could provide at this point on the difference between the two.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no further questions of clarification. So what are the wishes of Community Council? It's my area, so I can't do it. I'm chairing. So Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd be happy to put it on the floor. I move that Halifax and West Community Council 1 approve the proposed amending development agreement, which shall be substantially of the same form as set out in attachment A of the staff report dated June 26, 2024, and 2, require that the agreement be signed by the property owner with 120 days or any extension granted by council on request of the property owner from the date of the final approval by council and any other bodies as necessary, including applicable appeal periods, whichever is later. Otherwise, this approval will be void and obligations arising hereunder shall be at an end.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Stoddard. She beat you to it, I'm afraid, Councillor Morse. Councillor Cleary, comments?
So as Mr. McDougall mentioned, this has got a history. So I think this would be the 5th time I think I've spoken on this, because we talked about it very briefly during the Housing Accelerator Fund amendments when this was included to add the additional 2 stories, which prompted the planners to come back to us with a new public hearing. And so we've been supporting this all the way through. And I think the idea for Halifax and the urban core in general, and specifically pedestrian-oriented main streets like Quinpool Road, the additional density, which, as Mr. Lowen had pointed out, the building's already going there, so we're just adding a few dozen more units on top by 2 extra stories to something that was going to be going up anyway. And in general, more population means these businesses, especially small business on Quinpool, have more customers. And we have bus routes on Quinpool. We have walking distances of, only a few hundred meters, maximum of 1.5 kilometers to downtown. And so it's a very walkable community. It's the perfect place for extra density. So I support this application and applications like it.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. Any further discussion from the rest of the committee? Councillor Morse? No? I'll speak from, thank you. I'll speak from here, if I may. It's pretty hard to change chairs with Iona. She's not here. To go back to a question that Councillor Morse asked about how this is different from the center plan, this did predate the center plan. So what I vaguely recall from 6 years ago is that the mid-rise component and the way it faces Pepperell is a little bit chunkier and larger and taller than we would allow now. And so that's part of why it wasn't as easy as just saying, well, they've got a little bit of FAR or whatever. They could come back in and do the FAR of 5 or average, or use the FAR of 6 on the 2/3 facing Quinpool and do the podium. But I suspect, as Mr. McDougall indicated, there's another proposal coming on Quinpool Road that I've just recently seen where it's going to have a 3-story podium and a 17-story tower, and it's an FAR of 6. So on a similar size, slightly larger lot. So that's not to say one is better than the other. It's just that I understand that a significant redesign of the project would be required. There is the argument to be made, which I think Ian made quite well, that it is now at the proposed FAR for the average for the site. But it was always a bit of an odd duck because it predated a lot of the standards of the center plan. And I think given the fact that the stuff around it is all going to be 10 stories or so, even though this goes back a little bit farther in the tower component and the mid-rise on the back is a little bit bigger, picking up 38 extra units on something that's already under construction, I think is worth it in this limited case. But as Mr. McDougall said, I would not, we're not anticipating more development agreements. Everything that comes in going forward, they're going to have to plan for what's available. But I think that this is a good compromise to get us more units while continuing to move the project forward and not stall it for another year or two, which I think is really critical at this point. So, and I still think it's a good building for the area. So I look forward to it going ahead. I ask for your support. So, seeing no further discussion, if someone would care to call for the question.
Question.
Question's been called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much to staff and the public and the proponent for coming out for that hearing. We'll move on to 10.1.2, case 24359, development agreement for 253739 Agricola Street, Halifax, for a 27.3 meter mixed use addition to a registered heritage property. The presentation is going to be brought to us by Carter Beaupre McPhee, Planner 3. Thank you for coming tonight. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening to the Chair and Councillors. My name is Carter Beaupre McPhee, Planner 3 Heritage, and staff are pleased to present to you today case 24359, the application for a Heritage Development Agreement at 2537 and 2539 Agricola Street in Halifax. This is an application by Eco Green Homes on behalf of the property owner to enter into a Heritage Development Agreement permitting an 8-story plus amenity penthouse mixed-use addition to the registered heritage property known as Open Mike House. Here is a look at the site in question. As you can see, it encompasses both the Open Mike House property and the neighboring Carlo Auto property. Process-wise, we are at the public hearing and decision stage, and if approved by Community Council, this application will proceed to a 14-day appeal period. Regional Council previously reviewed a concurrent substantial alterations application associated with this Heritage DA, which was approved by them on February 6th of 2024. The subject property is serviced by municipal water and sewer and is located in the corridor designation and the corridor zone. Its existing uses include residential use for the Open Mike House and a non-conforming auto repair use for Carlo Auto. This application is being enabled under policy CHR 7 of the Regional Center Secondary Municipal Planning Strategy. Policy CHR 7 supports the retention and rehabilitation of heritage buildings by allowing their owners to apply for a development agreement for development or use not otherwise permitted by the underlying zone, thus encouraging adaptive reuse of registered heritage properties. The proposal may be summarized as follows. It includes the construction of a 27.3 meter mixed-use addition containing residential and commercial uses, with the front half of the open mic house being retained, rehabilitated, and adaptively reused as commercial space. A piazza open space between the heritage building and parking garage entrance is included to activate the street frontage. A second-story balcony, which will repair the street wall and serve as an open-air dining and musical performance space, is included. A rooftop amenity and mechanical penthouse is also proposed, and one level of underground parking accessible from Agricola Street, which includes 10 vehicular spaces and 18 bicycle spaces, is also proposed. Here we have the right side and front elevations. Here we have the left side and rear elevations. And here we can see a rendering of the rehabilitated heritage building and the redesigned street wall, as well as a rendering of the rooftop amenity space. Conservation of the heritage building will include the retention of the front 54% of the heritage building, including all character-defining elements, the replacement of the existing failed foundation with a new foundation clad in reclaimed brick, the repair and, where necessary, replacement in kind of all character-defining elements, the replacement of the modified front entrance with a new entrance appropriate in design and materials to the building, and other substantial and non-substantial alterations as outlined in the HRM Substantial Alterations Report, HRTG 2023-01146, approved by Regional Council on February 6, 2024. A complete policy review is provided in Attachment B, evaluating this application against policy CHR 7 and other applicable policies. Its compliance with CHR 7 is summarized as follows. Heritage value will be maintained through the retention and rehabilitation of all character-defining elements. Impacts are minimized as the surrounding area contains a mixture of buildings ranging from single-family homes to multi-unit mid-rises, as well as residential and commercial uses, including restaurants, storefronts, and auto repair shops. This proposal is comparable in density with other existing and in-construction developments in the area, and its uses will be less disruptive or impactful than the existing non-conforming auto service use. The new addition achieves compatibility with its surroundings through the repair of the historic street wall with the second-story balcony and pergola, the setback of the new addition's massing behind the heritage building, and the preservation of informal open space, which was previously provided by a surface parking lot, improved in the form of a piazza with landscaping, providing an open space that can be programmed or used organically in Agricola Street's various street markets and festivals, a function which the existing parking lot has previously served. The proposal complies with wind and shadow impact, public view and terminus, and bonus zoning requirements where applicable, and there are no unregistered historic buildings on the subject site. Agricola Street is a mixed-use environment, primarily zoned corridor. Adjacent properties reach up to 7-story maximum development potential as of right, and nearby developments of a similar scale include the 7-story Robb on Robert Street and the 7-story Maynard Suites on Maynard Street to the rear of this property. Staff find this proposal is comparable in scale with surrounding development, and staff have evaluated the level of investment in the conservation of the heritage building to be commensurate with the additional development rights being awarded beyond as of right. Staff also find that this development fulfills Regional Center SMPS objectives regarding accommodating future growth, retaining the character of the neighborhood, ensuring change is compatible and relates to this character, and so on. The development's design through the balcony and piazza enables its continued function as a culturally significant live music venue and outdoor gathering space, contributing to the vibrant character of Agricola Street. The new addition has been designed to minimally impact the heritage building by retaining all character-defining elements and proposing a physical connection only at the rear of the building. The site offers access to nearby transit priority corridors, established pedestrian and active transportation networks, and the Halifax Common. Staff find that the proposed development satisfies standards 1 through 12 of the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada. All character-defining elements will be repaired wherever possible and replaced in kind wherever necessary. The new addition's massing is set back behind the heritage building, enhancing the heritage building's prominence and preserving the open space of the piazza. The addition's simplified design and neutral cladding will reduce its visual impact and subordinate the addition to the heritage building. The ground and second stories of the new addition employ brick complementary to the reclaimed brick facing of the heritage building's new foundation, and takes cues from the cornice lines of the heritage building in the balcony and pergola design, enhancing compatibility with the heritage resource. Lastly, the addition's modern design ensures it remains differentiated. The design and materiality choices enabling subordination and compatibility also fulfill policy CH16 of the regional plan. A summary of public feedback is provided in attachment C. 802 fact sheets were mailed out to residents in the notification boundary. 6 responses were received. Feedback was predominantly supportive or supportive with qualifying concerns. Concerns were primarily regarding provision of sufficient parking and proposed height of the development. The required level of parking under the Regional Centre Land Use Bylaw for this development in this zone would be 0 vehicular spaces, but the proposal instead provides 10 underground vehicular spaces, with 2 of them accessible. The land use bylaw would also require 15 bicycle parking spaces, and the proposal instead provides 18 underground bicycle parking spaces. As mentioned previously, staff find the scale of this development comparable with existing and proposed developments in the surrounding area and with adjacent zoning and height limits, and commensurate with the level of investment in conservation of the heritage building. The staff recommendation contained in the staff report was arrived at after detailed analysis of all relevant policies, as well as the standards and guidelines for conservation of historic places in Canada. In conclusion, staff have reviewed the proposal and find it reasonably consistent with the intent of applicable policies. The proposed development represents infill mixed-use development in a designated corridor that will be supportive of and compatible with the heritage character of the subject site and the surrounding neighborhood. The level of conservation effort proposed for the open mic house is proportionate to the increased density being proposed. Thus, staff recommend that Halifax and West Community Council approve the proposed development agreement. Finally, staff have identified a requirement in section 3.5.5 of the proposed development agreement, attachment A, which should, for clarity, defer to the requirements of the underlying land use bylaw. On staff's advice, the Heritage Advisory Committee recommended the amendment on screen before you. The amended recommendation is before you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beaupre McPhee. Is just to clarify with clerk, so the one that we have in the motion we have in the agenda, that's the amended motion?
I believe that is the case.
Okay, we'll cross that bridge when we set fire to it shortly. Moving on then, thank you very much. Are there any questions of clarification to staff or members of Community Council? Going once, going twice. Moving on, I am now opening the public hearing. I will invite the applicant to address Community Council, Edward Edelstein of Eco Green Homes, and I see he's joined by the proponent. Please go ahead, sir. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Councillor. We're going to start actually with Grant Rufinango, who's the son and part owner of the property.
Yes, so hello, Council. I'm certain you're familiar with the open mic house at this point, so I'll keep it relatively brief. But really just wanted to give you a little bit of background to the site, the story of it, and kind of my family's connection to it. But the original Carlo Auto Service was built by my uncle, probably circa the 1970s, up until the point that my father had taken over when he moved here from Italy in the late 1990s. And I lived there briefly when I first arrived in Canada at like 3 years old. And so the site's been in my family for about 40 to 50 years now. And Halifax has always had quite a close connection to my family because of this reason. And so what's kind of come up is that with that time that's passed and my father working at the garage for this time, and now it's non-complying use as well, it's kind of, we're thinking about kind of what to do next for the space. So what we're thinking is this development agreement that we've been proposing. which is a mixed use 8-story development utilizing the open mic house. And really that's because the open mic house has had quite a significant amount of value to the community that's happened alongside the value that the garage has provided to my family. But as the music space, the open mic house has been active for the community since like the early 2000s, starting with Ben Kaplan and starting with Jacques Minero and a lot of other notable musicians been living in that house for years now. We think it makes sense to develop the space in such a way that's sensitive to that story and really highlights it in such a way. And so what we're proposing to you is continuing the open mic house as a designated registered heritage site. And we've been doing it more recently with the North End Biz Association support by activating the street as a music venue. And we want to continue that with this development. And so really the development agreement just enables us to think about what's next for the property from a development lens, have the garage, have my dad get out of the garage, quite frankly, and retire. And really try and build something that makes sense for the community with the Housing Starter Fund in place and with the center plan now in place, really think about what's kind of coming next for the city. And so there's definitely a need for more housing. And so that's what we're proposing is building. And I'll pass it off to Ed here, who has more to present to you on the actual design and what's being proposed from a logistics standpoint.
Krista, could we have, or whoever's running it, our first slide there, please?
Let me jump in there. So that is my father. And again, let me tell you that his hair is not that black these days. So that is kind of what why we're thinking about this picture is probably circa early 2000s. So again, this property's been in my family for many years, and we're quite excited at the prospect of us developing it ourselves and kind of being able to control the story of what happens for the site next, because I think it makes a lot of sense for a local business owner to step into development with the way the city's growing and actually be able to contribute to the city's growth. Please take the next photo.
Next slide, please.
And again, this is kind of current use of what's been going on. This is with the support of the North End Biz Association. This is how we've been activating the street, and with the piazza and the second level balcony that we've been proposing, and with the restoration of the open mic house. This is what we're kind of envisioning for the open mic house to continue onward. Next slide, please. Now I'll pass it to Ed.
So when Grant and his father approached me, they said they wanted to create a restaurant where the current parking lot is. And after talking to staff, we endeavored to register the open mic house as historic, which was successful. And also we went through a process for substantial alteration of the open mic house, retaining the front 54 or so percent. So this is an unusual project in that most developers in the North End, for example, the North project that's going on down on Gottingen Street, required the demolition of the existing Halifax box. So what's unusual about this proposal is we're proposing to restore it and make it a kind of historic frontispiece for the development. And because of that, the clients are giving up in a way about 6 meters of the front of the property, which could have been developed as of right for increased density. But this is a very unusual block of Agricola. I just live right around the corner on Charles Street. It's very lively. It's very touristic in a way. The double-decker tourist buses stop in front of Compass every day in the summer. And we think that the project as proposed will enhance the appeal, if you will, of the block. So this site plan just shows that there's a piazza. The front parking garage is designed to be old and match in appearance the heritage house. And then at the back, there'll be a 3-meter setback on ground level, which is called private backyard there. Next slide, please. This is a front elevation and a side elevation. As Carter mentioned, we tried to retain some of the vertical element found in the facade of the open mic house, while not slavishly kind of copying it. And neutral colors and neutral tones. So the intention, as you'll see, is to really make the open mic house prominent. In our study of the area, what I found interesting was North End Halifax as a working class community in and around 1900, the subdivision where these Halifax boxes, this is the only remaining Halifax box on this block, and it will be prominent, being seen in front of the new development. The other interesting point, I think, is that Halifax boxes, one recognizes them mainly from the front facade. For example, on Charles Street, there are a number of Halifax boxes just around the corner. Most of them, the vast majority, are row townhouses. So actually the only thing you see is the front facade. In this case, you will see the three-dimensional form of the box in front of the development. Next slide, please. The intention of the balcony is really to serve as a stage for the musical venues that occur now on the level where you see the chairs there. As someone who walks over on Friday evenings to sometimes listen to the music, it's an interesting scene because not only are there people standing in front of where the musicians are, but the patrons of Envie and Freeman's Pub and the Brasserie on 2 levels all enjoy hearing and seeing what's going on. So our thought is that this second level balcony, which is part of a 2-level restaurant, which you see with the curtain wall there, will be the stage, if you will, for the music venues that occur on Friday evenings. As a neighbor in the area, I never hear any of the music from where I live, just around the corner. And also
30 seconds.
Anyway, it will they all stop at 9 o'clock. Last slide, please. Oh. Yeah, anyway, the neighbors are building 7 stories, and this is an 8-story build, which has the same density as they would be allowed to do as of right if they didn't create the piazza and retain the house.
Thanks for your time, Council.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both. So I'll ask for questions of clarification from members of council.
Question.
Going once, going twice, gone. So I could review the rules for a public hearing because this meeting is taking place virtually, et cetera, et cetera. People had to register by 4:30 yesterday. There are no registered speakers. So I will ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
Chair, I don't think you heard me or
Oh,
something.
whoops. Sorry. Oh, you had a question. Sorry, Councilor Smith. I thought you said none. Councilor Smith has a question. Go ahead, Councilor Smith.
All good. Super quick question. And luckily I've had many conversations about this property with the applicant, so I have a good understanding of what they're trying to do. And So what I'm trying to understand is what your feedback from residents, neighbors has been going through, because I know you've been talking to them, so I'm just wondering if we can share some of that information since we have no one here to speak to us.
I think initially some residents were concerned about the height. Other than that, the comments have been generally positive. We had a meeting, as you may be aware, I designed and built Compass next door. We had a meeting with the owners who were interested for a time in renting some of the space on the main floor. I don't think that'll happen, but I haven't had any sort of negative anything from any of my neighbors around the corner. I don't know if you have.
No, I mean, generally, it's been all positive feedback. I think most people would like to see the open mic house continue, and recognizing that it can't necessarily continue in the same capacity it once did. And so this is like a very good alternative way for it to continue in the way it was. And yeah, I mean, from a design perspective, I definitely think I get the odd person around concerns around height, but I also think that, again, there's 7 stories going right next door. But generally, people are completely familiar with the fact that we need more housing as it stands, right? And so I think one other component to add as well is I think people are used to seeing in the North End people from outside of the city, outside the province, buying property and developing it that way, and it being not someone local having developed it. And I think when people recognize that story, I think it resonates with people quite a bit. Again, my father Bruno is a bit of a character in the neighborhood, and so people recognize him, know who he is. And I think also Daniel and guys in the house who through the years of the open mic house, generally we've all had good support for this. So that's been my feedback, at least.
That's helpful, and I'll move the public hearing closed if no one else is speaking.
Nobody else. I couldn't tell, Councilor Clear, if you want to speak or if you're voting in favor of Councilor Smith's motion. Voting in favor. All right. So all those in favor of closing the public hearing.
Aye.
Thank you. Public hearing is now closed. You folks can go back to the cheap seats. Members of Community Council can now request staff clarification for any parts of any questions raised during the public hearing. Seeing none, going once, going twice. So we will now move to the final component. What are the wishes of Community Council?
I'll move the motion with clarification. So the motion on the agenda is okay to read?
Yes, correct.
All right. So that Halifax West Community Council, 1, approve the proposed development agreement, which shall be substantially of the same form as set out in attachment A, staff report dated May 3rd, 2024, with amendments to the second sentence of section 355 of the proposed development agreement. Furthermore, any elevator enclosure shall be subject to requirements of the Region Center Land Use Bylaw as mentioned from time to time. And 2, require the agreement be signed by the property owner within 120 days or any extension thereof granted by council under request of the property owner for the date of final approval by council and any other bodies as necessary, including applicable appeal periods, whichever is later. Otherwise, this approval will be void and obligations arising hereunder shall be at net.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilor Smith. Councilor Cleary, anything on this? Councilor Smith.
Really quickly, I'll say one, I'll just give kudos to staff on their presentation, because it was short enough but detailed enough where it answered a lot of questions that I might have had. And I feel like this being a heritage DA, a lot of that good information that was needed was highlighted in that presentation. So kudos to staff, because that definitely really answers a lot of questions and also gives context to what's happening around and how this fits the neighborhood. So overall, I support it. As I mentioned earlier, I had lots of conversations around this, and I really do feel that the owner wants to make sure that it's integrated with the community from its current use and with the future use if approved today. So with that, I have no issues. The concerns that I've heard from residents are similar about height and parking, which was addressed. And I think height is that red herring that we always hear about. But I think there's also been some good work done in terms of setting it back from the street and with the design. So overall, I support this and hope community council does too.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Anything further from the rest of the committee? I'll just say from here that I love the idea of what I've heard over and over again from engineers, architects, and heritage people is you can't connect a wood building to a concrete building and survive the engagement with the building officials and building code. And I am hopeful that this will survive that, which would open up a whole new vista for us for heritage preservation, at least of, facades or the front 50 or 60 or 70% of a building. Should this, when this is successful. So I think this is a great test case for something that we've certainly wanted to see for a long time in Halifax, given how much of our built history is covered in shingles instead of bricks, which makes it harder to save. So I think this is an excellent test case. So I will support it. Seeing no further questions, if someone would like to call the question.
Question?
Question's been called. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Carries. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 11, which is correspondence, petitions, and delegations correspondence. Madam Clerk, any correspondence received?
So correspondence has been received for items 10.1.1 and 10.1.2 and has been distributed to Community Council.
Excellent. Are there any petitions, Madam Clerk?
No petitions have been received by the clerk's office.
Do any council members have petitions they would like to submit? Seeing none, we'll move to presentations. There are none. Public participation. No one registered to speak at the meeting, so there is none. Item 13, information items brought forward, none. Reports, none. Motions, none. That brings us to item 16, in camera. And we have a single in-camera item, which is approval of the in-camera minutes of July 16th, 2024. Someone care to make the motion here? Unless you have something you want to say in camera. Moved by Councillor Cleary, seconded by?
I'll second.
You got on the board, Councillor Morris. Good for you. So moved by Councillor Cleary, seconded by Councillor Morris. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. There are no added items. Do any members have any notices of motion? I'm seeing none. The date of our next meeting is September 9th, 2024. And I will say, just for the record as chair, when we did the agenda review, we have a number of things that are coming that are variance hearings and perhaps another heritage hearing that all are relatively time-bound or in the case of a variance hearing, ideally strictly time-bound, which means we could be meeting right up until October, despite the fact that there's an election this year. And so, I worked really hard with staff to try and find a way to have as few meetings or as short meetings as possible, but we have these legal requirements and we'll be meeting next month and probably in October. So I wanted to let everybody be aware. So with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Adjourned by Councillor Cleary. We're done. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Krista. Thank you, Mr. Chair.